Okay, sorry about that. I couldn't help myself. Anywho, good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to Asylum. I kind of wish I remembered what chapter we were on. Where were we? Getting there, getting there. So I bought the Five Nights at Freddy's masks that we have at my store, and I had a purple shirt. I had purple shorts. I figured, why not? I thought it would be fun, and it kind of was. What was I gonna say? Okay, I found it. Sorry, we're in chapter 30. I remember now. Page 249. I take it she's your police escort? Abby asked, eyes wide with fascination. Naturally. Oh, I bought some Yu-Gi-Oh cards yesterday because the box had the Egyptian god cards, and now I finally have all three. Anywho, yeah, I didn't need to look over his shoulder to know Officer Coates, that was her name, was standing 3 feet behind him. So what happened last night? Jordan asked. Morning light streamed in through the cafeteria windows over his shoulder. The line for pancakes was usually out the door, but it was significantly shorter today. Almost a third of the program's students were gone. I mean, after you texted me. I didn't text you, Dan replied automatically, thinking hurt. He'd hardly slept. His head was stuffed with sleepy wool. I don't know what that means. He choked down a second cup of coffee and waved to Officer Coates. She rolled her eyes. It's mean? I'm lost, Abby admitted, holding up a hand. Did he text you or not? Jordan got a message from me. It was in my phone, but I can't remember sending it, because I didn't. It sounded ridiculous enough that he didn't blame Abby for her skepticism. Nope, still lost, she said. Me too. Dan forked his pancake apart into 3 pieces and scooted them around in a lake of syrup on his plate. He wanted food to taste good again. He wanted life to make sense again. Anyway, the same thing happened but with Felix. I don't want to go into it. The whole thing's a gigantic mess. You don't want to go into it? But there's a cop following you around. You don't think that might warrant a bit of explanation? Abby watched him intently from across the table. Dan knew that he hadn't been fully forthright with them about things. He was no longer entirely sure why, as much as he liked the idea of having best friends with whom he could share anything. It was like all he knew how to be was alone, apart. I am no stranger to this. Where was I? Oh, maybe your phone is haunted, Jordan said bitingly. Maybe we should perform an exorcism. Don't worry, Abby cut in. This is all just a misunderstanding, I'm sure of it. I wish I was so sure. Dan, not worry, Jordan cackled. You're better off telling a duck not to quack. I can agree to that. Thanks, you two. You always know how to make me feel better. After breakfast, Dan walked to class with his friends, with Officer Coates falling 10 feet back. What do they think I'll do? Dan wondered aloud. Run? Where would I go? It does feel a little excessive, Abby agreed, glancing back at their tail. At least she's giving you space. I'm sure it could be worse. Dan appreciated that Abby was determined to find the silver lining in everything that morning. He needed a dose of her optimism in his life. I can relate to that. They split up when they reached the academic buildings, Jordan heading to one of his math classes, while Abby walked off to the art building. Dan wasn't prepared for the humiliation of attending class with an armed escort. Officer Coates waited outside his classroom, but even so, he felt the burn of accusing eyes on him. The remaining students pointed and whispered with zero subtlety. Dan could do nothing but put his head down, take notes, and try not to burst into flames from the embarrassment of it all. It didn't help when he got a note, or got past the note that said, "Go home, psycho." You can relate to that. Did you guys ever watch the Addams Family TV show that was on Fox Family, I think it was at the time, back in the day? I remember one episode with Gomez, and just everything everybody's saying is, I'll drink to that. And so, yeah. But I don't drink, so I don't say anyway. Halfway through the lecture, Dan lost all ability to concentrate. He listened, not really understanding the words, and his hand continued to move, but he had no idea what he was writing. When class was over, Dan looked down at his notes and bit back the urge to shout. The last few sentences weren't in his normal script, but he recognized the looping penmanship immediately. The warden's. It wasn't enough that the warden was in his head. He was now in his body, too. Ugh. He collected his things at lightning speed and ran out the door. If he didn't get some fresh air, he was going to be sick. How many pages on this one? Okay, I think we're good. Officer Coates stood in the sunshine waiting, and two other officers, including Teague, stood with her. Chatting with the police were the last two people on Earth he expected to see. Mom? Dad? Dan hugged his backpack to his chest. Sweetheart! I forgot her voice so long. His mother ran over and wrapped him in her arms. He was surprised by how good the hug felt, and he actually had a hard time letting go. A part of him wanted to cry. I miss my mom. You're okay, Sandy said, hugging him harder. You're okay, you're okay. It's good to see you, Mom, he said. Let's take this inside. Teague motioned toward the admissions building down the path. We should have this conversation in private. This was the moment Dan had been dreading since last night. His parents walked him north up the hill, the officers following a few steps in their wake. Dan couldn't seem to stop shaking. It didn't matter that he believed his own innocence. It would be impossible to convince anyone else once they found out how messed up he was. You just tell us if you need to call a lawyer, kiddo, his father whispered to him. They were right outside the admissions building now. Dan frowned. Dan frowned. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Inside, please, if you'll follow me, Teague said, charging ahead. Dan hadn't been inside the admissions building before. It had that venerated old college feeling, with a high ceiling and slender windows and wood paneling on everything. In the front hall was a leather couch and an antique chair. Dan imagined anxious students waiting here, hoping that their college interviews went well. College seemed like a petty concern at the moment. The police escorted them past the waiting area to a small room on the right. Teague and his parents went first, with Dan bringing up the rear. Officer Coates and another cop waited outside the door. He was now shaking so bad he could hardly sit down without knocking over the chair. Okay, let's have a chat about last night. Why don't you start from the beginning? Teague prompted. His parents and the officer sat on one side of a conference table, all facing Dan. It felt like an inquisition. Dan told the story about his searching for Felix and finding the man with the crowbar. When he described the man pinning him to the ground, he thought his mother was going to faint. Finally, he got to the part where the cops had barged in and started accusing him of the worst. The thing is, I really don't remember sending those messages. I know they're in my phone, I know that. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I swear I didn't write those texts. His parents shared a worried look, and his father cleared his throat. Officer, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, his father began gravely. But what you have to understand is, Dan has always had, shall we say, difficulties. He came to us from the foster system after he'd already lived in a few other places. He's been a great kid since then. I don't want you to misunderstand me, but, well, he's always needed a little extra attention. A few trips to the psychologist. Therapist, his mother corrected. Therapist, his father agreed. The officer nodded along with the story. Dan hated talking about this stuff with his parents at all, but in the presence of someone else, a cop, it was embarrassing, frankly, and in this case, incriminating. Teague glanced at him from time to time, and he could swear he saw the officer's jaw setting by degrees, getting stiffer as Dan's guilt solidified in his mind. His therapist tells us he has some issues with memory. Mild dissociative disorder, Sandy put in, but that they don't pose any problem for him having a normal, healthy life. He's not a dangerous kid, officer. He sent some text to his buddy and then forgot about it. I'm sure it was meant to be totally harmless. Dan gripped the chair, struggling to look calm. How bad would it be if he blacked out right then and there? That unreliable memory of his. How could he tell his parents that it had gotten much, much worse in just a matter of weeks? That maybe he wasn't completely harmless. No, Mr. and Mrs. Harold, I can't help noticing that Dan doesn't share your last name. Why is that? His parents exchanged another look. Dan wanted to sink into the floor and die. Huh. Well, Crawford is the name he came to us with, his father said. We gave him the choice, just like our social worker said we could, his mother said defensively. Dan had already lived with so many families by that point. I think he just wanted to keep one thing the same, one piece of himself. Teague said. He turned to address Dan directly. Are you aware that you have the exact same name as the last warden of Brookline Asylum? Dan nodded. I read about him recently. Yeah. His parents, bless their hearts, said nothing. He had asked them about it on the phone, but now they kept silent, perhaps sensing, as Dan did, that Teague saw the strange connection as some sort of proof of his guilt. It's not that unusual of a last name, his father said, and Lord knows Daniel is common enough. Well, what about Dan's birth parents? Teague asked, finally looking away from Dan. There must be a quick way to check if there's any relation. I'm afraid it's anything but quick, his mother admitted. We don't get to see that kind of information at all, and you'd need a court order to get it yourselves. But I can't see why it's so important. So what if Danny was related to this warden? What does that prove? You don't think it's a rather alarming coincidence? I think a coincidence is exactly what it is, and that's my whole point, his mother said testily. Dan hated to see his parents get angry, even if it was helping his case. His mouth suddenly gone so dry it was hard to speak. Did the guy who killed Joe ever confess? Teague stared, taken aback. Actually, no, he didn't. He insists he was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Still, he had the victim's possessions and a murder weapon on him, and he can't explain that. Teague snorted, giving Dan a look that said, "Lucky you." The officer leaned an elbow on the desk between them, his brow lowered, and Dan knew he should have kept his mouth shut. Why do you ask? Just curious. Dan hoped he could keep it together for a few more minutes. He felt like if he didn't get to the bottom of this mystery now, it would plague him for the rest of his life. I know exactly that feeling. It was Thursday. There were now 10 days till the end of the program. I want to finish out the program, he said calmly. We're not done questioning you yet, Teague replied, tugging at his mustache. How you answer those questions will determine whether you get to stay or not. Fair enough, Dan said. His father looked ready to argue, but his mother nodded. We'll stay in town, Danny, just in case. Dan couldn't fully explain why he needed to finish this program when there were so many reasons why he should run far, far away as fast as he could. Dan ending up at Brookline this summer wasn't a coincidence. It was a connection. And he was going to have to leave Brookline cured if it killed him. Okay, chapter 31. 13.5 minutes in. That's not too bad. And it's not that long of a chapter, too. Thankfully, although Teague grilled him for 3 more hours, wow. Nobody else seemed to think Dan was guilty. He had no motive to hurt Felix, no history of violence, and when the cops searched his dorm room, they found nothing of interest. Most importantly, Felix had woken up in the hospital and sworn that he didn't think Dan was behind this. Dan was totally drained by the time he was allowed to go. He walked his parents to their car and declined their invitation to eat dinner with them in town. He just wanted to be back in his room already. Dan hadn't gone 2 steps on the path toward Brookline when he saw Professor Reyes pacing next to an ash bin. She waved, cigarette in hand, beckoning him over. That is not a good sign. Let's see, where was it? Not in cuffs, I see, she said by way of greeting. Her brown eyes twinkled behind the thin veil of smoke that drifted up from her lips. That's a good sign. Looks like your parents were pretty worried about you. Oh, they're fine. There's just a little tense in there. Her necklace was made of opals today, as fine and white as bone. I don't know the particulars, but you seem like a good kid. She shook her head, pursing her lips to blow a jet of smoke up and away from them. I would still be affected. Brookline just has a way of taking a hold on people. Always has. It's the self-fulfilling prophecy of madness. If someone tells you you're crazy enough times, eventually it becomes true. That's an old psychiatrist's joke. Insanity's all in your head. I appreciate that joke. Dan looked at his shoes, tempted to tell her that no, some conditions were in fact very real. I'm not sure I know what you mean. All I'm saying is people in town don't want Brookline gone just because of what happened there 50 years ago. Professor Reyes dropped her cigarette and stamped it out. The wind picked up her short dark hair, tossing it in front of her eyes. Good luck, Dan. I hope you don't need it. Abby and Jordan waited outside his door for him. They had even snuck out a pie from the cafeteria, hiding it under a windbreaker. Rhubarb with extra whipped cream, his favorite. I've never had rhubarb. Is it any good? What's it taste like? What? They piled into his room. Abby pointed to Dan's bed while Jordan sorted out the dessert for everyone. Come and sit, Abby said. I have news. We want to hear all about your date with the cops. Thanks, Dan said, taking a bite out of his pie. It's been a hellish day. The cops work you over? Jordan asked. They were pretty decent, actually. My parents were there, which helped. Seriously? Abby said anxiously. They're not making you leave, are they? I was going to say stay. I'm not. Never mind. No, I can finish the program, so at least there's that. And Felix saved me, too. I guess he told the cops he didn't think I was a threat. He had decided not to tell them about the rest of it. Right now he needed them on his side. Dan, I'm so sorry, Abby murmured, shifting her chair closer. But at least you're not in trouble. That's good, right? It is, yeah. So what was your news? Abby lit up. Dan was grateful for a reason to stop talking about himself, and she looked ready to pop with excitement. The news is that I've decided to complain about Lucy to my father, she said, bouncing in her chair. It's time he knew about her, and I've picked up the trail. He deserves to know the truth. I mean, I would want to, wouldn't you? Wow, Dan said. He couldn't tell if it was the exhaustion or something else keeping him from matching Abby's excitement. Are you sure that's a good idea right now? What? Abby asked slowly. Why would it not be a good idea? She's his sister. I'm hoping he might even want to help me find her. You don't think it's sort of coming out of nowhere? I mean, the shock and all. What if he doesn't believe you? I'd freak if it were me. I mean, it's been so many years, Jordan added. No, it has to be this way, Abby replied with a little nod of finality. I'm not going to keep this from him. I just can't. It wouldn't be right. He's so used to keeping things hidden from people. He just can't understand what people would want shared. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And Dan's not much better. Anyway. Where was I again? Maybe this is harsh, Jordan responded, but as your friend, I feel it's my duty to state for the record that I think your idea is pants-on-head crazy. And as your other friend, I'm sorry to say, I second that motion. Dan raised his hand into the air. Well, neither of you gets a say, she shot back, shoving her pie aside. It's my decision, and it's my father. I just thought you guys would be happy for me. With everything that's happened at this horrible place, I thought this could be something good to come out of it. She stood, dusting off her hands. I'm calling him, she said, adjusting the zipper on her paint-splattered sweatshirt. He's going to know the truth about Aunt Lucy tonight. Abby turned and swept out of his room in a huff. Jordan raised an eyebrow at him as if to say, What? You're not going after her? Uh-oh. But Dan was exhausted, and after his long day of questioning, he was dying for a moment alone. Plus, there was something he desperately needed to check. Something he'd been trying not to think about since class that morning. Jordan seemed to get the hint. Well, you know where to find me, I guess, he said, letting himself out and closing the door behind him. Immediately, as if he were ripping off a Band-Aid, Dan reached into his backpack and pulled out his past notebooks. He flipped the page of notes He flipped to the page of notes he'd taken today when he caught himself writing in the looping script of the warden. On the bottom of the page he'd written, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Albert Einstein." Fighting the urge to throw up, Dan tore through the rest of his notebook, scanning the pages for any more disturbing asides. Sure enough, he found a sentence in his history of psychiatry notes attributed to Aristotle. It was possible Professor Reyes had put this quote up on the board for them to copy down, but he definitely didn't remember writing it, and the script wasn't his. No great mind has ever existed without a touch of madness. Dan leapt to his feet, tossing the notebooks off of him as if they carried a disease. All these notes, on his desk, under his bed. No wonder it seemed like he had a stalker everywhere he went. He'd written these notes, delivered them to himself. Mild dissociative disorder. Dissociative order, there we go. Dr. Oberst had said. Harmless lapses in memory, she'd said. What did she know? She was no better than the doctors who'd been at Brookline 50 years ago. At least their treatments had gotten results. Oh no, don't think that. Now Dan was faced with the fact that he was blacking out for long stretches of time, forgetting text messages, notes, even pictures with his best friends. And, oh yeah, who could forget the little fact that every time someone had been attacked, there'd been a mental gap he couldn't account for. Unconscious in the basement when Joe had been killed, napping in his room when he was knocked out, and sending ominous text messages when Felix was nearly bludgeoned with a crowbar. These lapses in memory seemed far from harmless to him. But Dan wasn't ready to believe that he was a cold-blooded killer. He was channeling the warden, not the sculptor, and as strange as it was to find comfort in that fact, Dan had to admit, he'd rather find creepy notes in his possession than a garrote any day. But what about his birth parents? Officer Teague's questions still reverberated in his ears. He'd been so sure that Dan was related to the cruel warden that it had something to do with why Dan was here. Dan had let his mother cast it off as a coincidence, but he knew that nothing about the summer had been coincidental. Being here was his destiny. It was his destiny to solve the mystery of what had happened to the warden, the sculptor, and Lucy. Dan remembered that Abby had visited the old church and found Lucy in the records. Maybe the records could work the same magic for him. Occam's razor, or whatever the heck you wanted to call it. It couldn't wait another minute. He refused to accept another restless night, another nightmare-riddled sleep. Grabbing his flashlight and the closest thing to a weapon he had, a pair of scissors. Oh, great. Again, step inside and into the night. Okay, a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be, but not too bad. I'm going to clean out Iggy's cage real quick and then get him back. I'm going to get some more water. I'm going to get the turtles some food and feed Iggy. And then we're going to play some Costume Quest before I go for work. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. And until next time, bye everybody. I'm really thirsty though.